I'm Amy Heiger. I'm the president of the PTL Union. We haven't met before. We appreciate the opportunity that you're giving us. And Brian Sachs is actually going to start our discussion.
Sure. Hi, Dr. Moghe. We've met before. We've met in the Rutgers Senate. We spoke also in February, which I'll refer to in my comments. I want to say on behalf of the board and everybody, thanks for accepting our invitation in President Holloway's stead. I wanted to take about 5 minutes or so to go over some of the things you've had a hand in recently that have helped PTLs at Rutgers, but also to highlight some of what we believe still needs to be done to create a really just working environment for us. The first thing to note is that, as has been said earlier in the call, that Dr. Moghe's office presided over the distribution of the professional development funds for PTLs this year, and that under his watch, we were awarded the largest amount that the funds ever distributed. Our board met with academic labor relations to ensure that funds could be used to cover some of the costs of the technology that we use to teach online. And Dr. Moghe's office allocated more than what was required by contract or what was stipulated. And so we appreciate that. But as you'll hear, Dr. Moghe, many PTLs were still not able to avail of the fund for reasons that remain unclear and appear unfair. Second, your willingness to meet with board member Karen Thompson and I back in February so we could make the case to you in person for lifting the PTL hiring freeze was also appreciated. And some of the context here is worth repeating for those who might not know. Prior to Dr. Moghe's elevation to his current position back in April 2020, the university announced a hiring freeze for PTLs and others across the university. This was just after the pandemic hit. This did considerable harm to PTLs, many of whom had taught at the university for decades and rely on teaching for their livelihoods. Hundreds of PTLs lost courses, and many went entirely unreappointed. Worst of all, perhaps, was that many of the PTLs who were left jobless had recently worked tirelessly during the spring 2020 term to convert courses for remote instruction, and they did so without any additional compensation from the university. All of us who did this conversion work did it so Rutgers could remain open and our students' learning experiences could continue uninterrupted. And we maintain that all PTLs should still be paid for this service to Rutgers. And of course, it remains upsetting that any PTL who did this, who served selflessly in this way, was then dismissed. We know that enrollments in fall 2020 didn't decline in most places as feared, though many departments did increase class sizes and cut course offerings for students nonetheless. So with all of that as context, your willingness, Dr. Moghe, to meet with Karen and I and other members of the coalition of Rutgers unions to personally hear our demand to lift the hiring freeze, I thought was an important gesture, and it's something I did appreciate. We were quite pleased as well, 3 days later, to learn that you had met that demand in sending a university-wide directive to all departments. At this very moment, though, many PTLs are still waiting to hear about reappointments for this fall. That anxiety is still there, and as our petition notes, timely appointment letters would go a long way to alleviating that. Finally, we welcome the remarks that you made to the Rutgers Senate earlier this year, stating that our union should have a strong voice in creating a forward-looking vision for teaching and for learning at Rutgers. This matters, Dr. Moghe, because the situation for PTLs at Rutgers remains precarious. We're rightly concerned about what the future holds for us here, and the important contributions we make every day to the life of this university, we think should be valued more. Hence, our petition. The petition, which has garnered more than 1,000 signatures this spring from PTLs, from full-time faculty, from graduate students, from members of Rutgers staff, and from our friends and allies in the broader Rutgers community, makes 3 very reasonable demands. It calls on departments to rehire PTLs who were not reappointed in the fall of 2020 and return class sizes and course offerings to pre-pandemic levels. It asks the university to send out PTL appointment letters by early June so that PTLs can plan their work schedules and their lives. And thirdly, it asks that Rutgers give all faculty, including PTLs, a significant voice in determining how to safely and fairly return to campus. As I'm sure you know, PTLs remain especially vulnerable to forms of pressure other faculty members don't face. We lack any real job security since we're hired for the most part term to term We would therefore welcome any communication from you to departments reminding them that hiring PTLs shouldn't be contingent on their willingness to teach face-to-face. We're already receiving reports from PTLs who believe they've lost or may lose positions this fall for expressing reasonable safety preferences. And so with all of that said, again, on behalf of our members, I want to thank you, Dr. Moghe, for meeting with us today and for your continued willingness to hear PTLs and respond to our concerns. We'd be glad to hear any remarks you'd like to make before we get to the many questions I know our members are eager to ask you. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. And keep scrolling down, okay? Because I think it just is. I think just the amount of support and the extent of support that is exemplified here. It just articulates how immense the work is that the PTLs do on behalf of the academic community and the stakeholders who support them. I am one of those stakeholders that supports the PTLs, and I'm continuing to work at this opportunity and this challenge. So if you are able to now exit from the spreadsheet, I can just say a few words if this is a good time, Brian. And then I'm happy to take questions, or if you want to send me questions, if we don't get a chance to get through all of them.
Sure, we have a timekeeper, Dr. Moghe. He'll alert you.
Okay, all right.
At the end of the segment. Thanks.
Yeah, so this is, again, you know, I mean, it's an unscripted, I'm sort of thinking aloud as I am with my PTL friends. And I remember having this conversation with Karen around the course that she teaches. And by the way, I'm hopeful that all of you are done grading. I know that many of you were in the midst of grading on the multiple courses. And so I'm hopeful that you're done with that. It's a huge sigh of relief that it's probably behind you. For those that are not completely done, my thoughts are with you and, you know, and the students, and we all appreciate not just the hard work you put into designing your curriculum and teaching it, but also grading our students in an appropriate and fair way. So there's just so much that you shape at the institution. And so this is deeply treasured. And I also want to say that I've been on this job now for about, I'm still counting my tenure in months, but I am very conscious of the work ahead. And also the unique times that just beset all of us, this sort of planetary crisis, if you will, that no one has been immune from. And my hope is that as we stabilize the institution, as we start moving towards this return to campus in the fall, that we can also find further means to support the PTL community in multiple ways that we wanted to do, perhaps couldn't get to because of the fact that we were just in this very strange place in the past year. So I just want to also echo that to all of you, just like most people that I encounter and myself as well, there's an immense fatigue that we all are bearing from this pandemic. It's really a once in a lifetime thing that none of us, we don't know of anyone, in fact, alive who probably went through this either in their lifetimes, maybe past the Spanish flu. And I don't know if we can fairly say that the pandemic is entirely done either. You know, so we are seeing improvement in the way that the pandemic has been managed here, but it's really important that the pandemic be managed globally so that we all can sort of really move forward to a completely pre-pandemic normal, whichever way that is operationalized. I also want to tell you that I have been working on sort of those three big buckets that you were talking about, Brian, right? Which is, I think it's sort of resonating in the petition, but if you sort of think about the life cycle of a PTL's contributions, right? It starts at the appointment, recruitment, appointment. Then there is the question around advancement, right? And the third one is around support, right? Or engagement, let's put it that way. And so this is the important PTL project for the institution, is how do we ensure that the most talented PTLs are recruited efficiently? And you talk about the appointments. You want to make sure that the appointments are done early enough that there's enough time for the PTLs to plan, which is what you would expect any professional employee to be treated as such. And so the same thing is particularly true about the PTL colleagues. The second one is around advancement. So I know we've been working on ways in which we can advance PTLs along the ladder, if you will, of advancement, academic advancement and career advancement. And then there is a project which I'm particularly drawn to, which is how do we work on converting some of the PTLs to NTT positions, because that ultimately will stabilize some of the PTL colleagues that we have. It may not apply to everyone, perhaps, and not everyone might be desirous of being in a full-time position, given that some PTLs from industry or other trades. But I think that is one way in which we can prevent the sort of the serial, sort of leveraging of PTLs in ways that are not always beneficial to the advancement of the PTL. And I believe that School of Arts and Sciences, Brian, has some data around the fact that they were able to convert a fair number of their PTLs to NTT positions. So that's something that we want to try to be mindful of. I'm reading some of your comments.
Forgive me, Dr. Moghe, I'm giving 1 minute notice.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Howie. The other thing was the PTL Development Fund was a one way to express that, the work that you did, especially during that very unique, traumatic period when you were dislocated, you were essentially moved back to wherever you were at home, and you had to kind of improvise on the fly and innovate. I thought it was particularly important to kind of provide support for you for that professional development work. Relaxing the hiring authorization exception approval from central HR to down to the chancellor and the academic levels was another way to improve the efficiency of appointments and reduce bottlenecks. Then we finally come back to this, coming back to the campus in the fall. And my belief is that the president in the next week or two is going to come out with sort of an overall institutional stance, which would be sort of more of a messaging at the high level of our vision in terms of how we want to try to come back, what is our aspiration. And then my sense is that, Brian, that with time, the next several weeks, you should expect to see every campus unit, chancellor unit, and their logistical operations to swing into high gear in terms of thinking about how will buildings be ready? How will the tenants be ready? How will people who are teaching in it, who are staffing it, be ready in a way that's safe, flexible, and equitable? So I think safety is the most important attribute here. Think about like a nested decision tree. Safety, flexibility, equity are important principles to be embodied in that plan. So that's what will be coming up. And I've heard about your, your request that PTLs, especially